it is delusion if you believe that there's not going to be difficulty.
What do I want to have at the end of my life?
I don't like where I'm at, but this is where I'm at, and this is my reality. I decided that I would endure the things that would come up time and time again in the future.
I love the concept, the thought of Amor Fati. It means love of fate. Whatever happens, don't just accept it and don't just be okay with it, but lean into it and believe it is for the best and believe that it is going to make you better. Use it as fuel. I love it. I'll make something of this and it's going to strengthen me.
Humans are the only creatures that I'm aware of that can literally visualize in the distance from a time perspective what they want to become by their choices and by these calculated, written down destinations in the future and actually get there.
But I think if I'm on the mat, you're going to have to choke me out.
If you're a man that controls his own destiny, a man that is always in the pursuit of being better, you are in the right place. You are responsible. You are strong. You are a leader. You are a force for good. Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.
Welcome back to the Alpha Quorum Show. Brad Singletary here. You guys, this is going to be an exciting episode. We got the dream team up in here. These are some of my favorite guys on this planet, and I think some of the best of the guests that we've had. And these aren't guests. These are regulars and are soon going to be a very integral part of all that we're doing here in the Alpha Quorum. On my right, I have Taco Mike. Welcome back, brother.
What's up, everybody? Hello, Brad.
We also have Jimmy Durbin, who's the episode that Mike, and I did is the most downloaded episode ever. That one was a shit sandwich. That's where we talk about our separations and how we brought our marriages back to life. One of our best ever. And also Mike Olsen. Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you guys for allowing me to come in here. This has been fun.
Mike's the good looking one in the room, mostly because of his grooming. He's got nice haircut and stuff. Everybody else,
he's the only one who tries.
Yeah, we're all a little scraggly over here. I think we have like 200 years between all of us. I know some of you are at least 50, and I'm on the way to 50. So we got like 200 years of experience in this room right now.
Yes.
So hopefully we can come up with some awesome things to share. Our topic tonight is endurance. We've been doing this series on the Red 9, and right now we're on endurance. And this is about the alpha who patiently pursues what he wants. He trains his mind. He keeps what he's pursuing visible as a written goal. He's open to new approaches, and he adjusts when necessary. He patiently perseveres with fortitude and grit. He seeks and accepts support, and he knows his limitations and quits only when he must. So I just think this is a fantastic topic. So many men, have energy out of the gate. I don't know if this is something they say in the South, or I don't know where I got this from, but imagine like a horse, he's hell out of the gate, but he ain't much for stamina. But anyway, hopefully that's not a sexual reference, but so endurance really is about dealing with difficult things, pushing through, pursuing the things you want. And these men here have been through some interesting experiences and have tons of wisdom and knowledge about how to endure. We've shared a lot of our difficulties on previous episodes, but I just want to talk about the importance first of being mentally tough, to train our mind first. What thoughts do you have about accepting the fact that things are going to be hard?
You mean not being a person trapped in delusional thinking, right? So aren't we in a way just talking about the mindset of being a realist, because life is often shitty and circumstances are often nowhere near what that idea or the ideal is. So to me, you're talking about a man, so we're talking about alpha here, who embodies the characteristics of endurance. I think one of the baseline building blocks of that is a man who just accepts wherever he's at in his life and whatever's going on in his life, whatever his current circumstances are, he just gets to a mindset where he can be calm, even if it's a shit show. Like, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, it's irrelevant. But if he could get to the mindset, if he could grow to the mindset where in this exact moment, he could just look at it and say, it is what it is. I'm okay with this. I'm not going to stay here. I don't like where I'm at, but this is where I'm at, and this is my reality.
I love how you're mentioning right out of the gate, talking about delusion. If it is delusion if you believe that there's not going to be difficulty. And the last 2 years have shown us that for sure, and if we can't get into the mindset that I can deal with difficult things and carry on, it's going to be a hard time. I love the Buddhist thought that life is suffering. And as we accept that, we actually suffer less. How about you two? Thoughts on training our mind, just getting to the belief that we can and will, that we will deal with difficult things, and that it's going to be okay. We can have some control in our lives.
I have a thought on that. Go ahead, Jimmy.
No, go ahead, Mike.
As you were talking about the delusion and endurance, and then especially this last 2 years dealing with COVID, I think the delusion or the difficult part in knowing that it was going to be rough, nobody knew how long the race was going to be. We still aren't sure half the time that we're out of the woods or that we're over it. And I think that's one of the things that someone who I'm going to interpret alpha in my own way is that trying to accurately gauge the time and the length of this race. If we're talking about enduring, and if we're talking about enduring happens to encompass time, a certain amount of time, and we just don't know. We didn't know, especially at the outset. We thought, this is going to be 3 months. We'll be out of this before too much longer. And it kept rolling, and it kept rolling. And it clearly has taken a toll on some people, and others have just figured out how to, we'll roll with it. I hate these masks. Some have just taken their own way, and they do whatever they want to, and then others just kind of, they get by and they just know that, all right, we'll get through this, but I can't sit here forever doing nothing, and that we'll get through this. It's just another adaptation that I'm going to have to do, and I'll figure out what I need to. Some really can take advantage of the situation, and I mean that in a positive way. From a business perspective, I know that there's probably been relationships that have crumbled. There's been businesses that have crumbled. There's someone fairly close to me, on the street, where they, at the time that COVID broke out, they were on a plane to India. The father of the family had died, and so they have to come back. And yet they had just invested, a few $100,000 in a venture to have some fabrication accomplished in India, and all of their business plans were basically living and dying on the fact that you could send a container. This is some of the industry that I'm involved in. You could have a container going to and from China for, $4,000 to $6,000. That went to $30,000 in just a matter of a few months, and it wiped them out. You would have had to have tens of millions to absorb some of those costs. And some of them, it wiped out that particular thing. And some people cannot sustain that kind of a loss. Others sustain that type of a loss. And some people were, through maybe a lucky break, able to say, we're not going to jump here. We're going to take a different business avenue and take advantage of the fact that now we can't go overseas. We can't get things overseas. And now we're in a position to do that in the United States from a manufacturing standpoint. And they were able to succeed. And I think that there's a lot of guys in the alpha world who, depending on what side of the fence they might be on, sometimes it cripples them, and sometimes it just temporarily makes them go, damn, that was a mistimed step, but let's get back on the horse and let's do it again. Yeah,
let's adjust. I mean, that story kind of encapsulates this whole topic, really. So mindset, Jimmy. What is the man who is, capable and strong and prepared and able to endure? What's going on in his mind? What does he think about himself and the world?
Oh, I mean, I like that he trains his mind first. The first thing that popped in my head is, how have I trained my sons? So I go generationally. How did my dad train me? And then I think, what about those men who have a dad deficiency, where there wasn't a dad to do the training? My greatest failure has been my addiction, right? It crippled me. And it was a retraining, a retooling, that humility, being in a position to ask for help, and the rigor. Even 12 years into sobriety, I still do my meetings. I still have my readings. I find a series of actions that I take every single day, regardless of how I feel. So fuck my feelings. I can't run my life on my feelings. And those actions are tied to what I define as spirituality. And the reason that becomes my North Star, and I'm training myself for that spot, is because I think, as I interact with all these energies, stress, shame, trauma, grief, how I define spirituality and being in that headspace then allows me to metabolize that energy.
I love that. I love how you describe that. So you're talking about there was some failure in your life, addiction brought you to bad places, but that's because there was some kind of training that you were missing, some mental preparation, but now you're staying in a place of sobriety because of what you've trained your mind to believe.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with a dad who instilled positivity, self-reliance, be strong. I mean, when it comes to fight, flight, or freeze, I'm running. And I did that as a teenager, and my dad kicked me out of the house and said, go beat up the bully. I'm crying, Dad, I don't want to. Don't come back into this house, until you get into a fight. Now that was his way, and that was his father's way. But I think there's some narcissistic traits that I had growing up that allowed me to have a strong sense of self that I could overcome, and not give up and endure. And I'm wired that I just realized on one hand I said I'm going to run, but I think if I'm on the mat, you're going to have to choke me out.
I have a question for you, Jimmy, on that, for those who may not quite understand what it's like to go through addictions, those who don't know it. Do you feel that your training of your mind and the exercises that you intentionally go through are as much because you are afraid of the negative consequence of not doing it, or is there a positive consequence for doing it that you're going after, or is it sometimes both? Help me understand your perspective of your why for going through it.
Yeah, I think it's been all that. I think it's
a mixture
of, and depending on where I was in the spectrum and in my years of recovery, I just was tired, in the beginning. And my ego is such that humility and my bottom looked like just being homeless.
Okay.
And I'd already tried to kill myself, and that didn't work, right? So I can't even do that, right, was the mindset. Like, it's Groundhog's Day. You want me to live this way, like some universe, some God, some karma, whatever. So it was in enough pain to be willing to ask for help.
Okay. Your bottom.
My bottom. And that was probably the first 5 years of just kind of trying to get stuff back, relationship with the kids, my wife. And then what I realized is those 12 steps in whatever recovery process it is, right, really, to me, is the best example of cognitive behavioral therapy, which means to say, change my thinking, to change my behavior. So those 12 steps represents 12 principles to change my cognitive thinking so that can help change my behavior.
And recognizing that you needed to intentionally do that to have the outcome you wanted.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So what is different about the alpha? You know, I just want to wrap this part of the topic up about mindset and about what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about difficulty, what we believe about the pursuit of worthy things. How does a man who is totally, you know, in control of himself, how does he think about the journey?
So the concept, so I think we're like scratching around endurance. Like, what is the base? Here's what I'm trying to grasp is like, what is the base core? What is the little nucleus at the center of endurance? And I believe that for me anyway, it is a mindset. And so it's a mindset that I have decided, I personally have made decisions in my life where I have sat down and evaluated consequences, and I've evaluated thoughts, and I have evaluated behaviors and outcomes, and I have used so we are created with a prefrontal cortex, right? We have the executive functioning component of our brain, which allows us to look and evaluate and make decisions based on outcomes and consequences. We can imagine. I can use my imagination to look into the future, a hope for a future, and then make decisions in the present that will lead me there. And I believe that when I decided to become a grown-ass man, instead of living a life that was moment by moment and being reactive to everything that happened to me, I had no plan, and I had no core fundamental, I had made no choices about who I wanted to be as a person, as a man, or anything. I just sort of reacted and ping-ponged around. Pachinko, you know, that little Chinese, I think it's Japanese game, right?
Keeps bouncing all
Bing,
the
ding,
way
ding,
down.
ding, ding, ding. Like, that was my life. And I would hit against a thing, and there would be a reaction. It would push me in this way and that way and that way. When I decided to be a grown-ass man, then I sat down and made executive-level decisions about who I was as a person, so that the outcomes would be as straight of a line as possible. Like, I determined that my life would be as much of a straight line in the direction of my goals and objectives as possible. The line would wiggle, but it would not be this zigzaggy sine wave of like extreme, extreme, extreme. It would be as straight of a line as possible. So here's the punchline. If someone, me, if I decide that I want to be a person characterized by the actions and attributes of endurance, then I needed to first make a decision that I was going to be a man and I would endure the things that I was going through. And that way I could look at the reality of my situation and accept it, because I knew that my goal was beyond where I was now. My goal is out there. And I'll just wrap up that thought by saying that was where it all began, is deciding to be a person, a man, who could endure the things I was going through. And then I decided that I would endure the things that would come up time and time again in the future as I moved towards what my goals were in life, that there would be new challenges and new, dangers and new opportunities and all the nonsense that would happen as I just traveled through life, that I would endure those new things each day, each time. And I think that's my summary statement, is this concept of endurance is a decision to be that type of person. I made it. I don't always follow through very well with it, but it is a core building block of who I am as a grown-ass man.
I love it. You're talking about a decision toward maturity, a decision to accept the things that happen. I love the little video the concept of Ryan Holiday bringing back some of the Stoic philosophy, the thought of Amor Fati. Have you guys seen that? I'll have to share it with you. It's a little 2-minute video, but he basically describes this little phrase. What is that? Amor Fati? Is that Latin or Greek or something? Anyway, it means love of fate. And what he teaches is, and this is, Marcus Aurelius and those type of guys, whatever happens, love it. Whatever happens, don't just accept it and don't just be okay with it, but lean into it and believe it is for the best and believe that it is going to make you better, and use it as fuel. And that mindset, that has changed me within probably the last year. COVID was a killer. I actually relapsed in my addiction. I had a difficult time in the mental health profession, so I'm dealing with the same things everyone else is. 6 kids, trying to make things work, and then I'm working probably 12 hours a day. It was a difficult time. And then I came across this thought of Amor Fati, which says, I love it. I will do the best. I'll make something of this, and it's going to strengthen me. And that's been something that's really helped me. Last thought on mindset, you two.
I think what Mike said is really key, and I was curious to ask you, Mike. I believe Amor Fati. I believe that is. It sounds like amore in Italian,
right? Yeah.
So it's probably Latin based.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm reading about it right now. Yep.
And so, this is the second part that I'm curious on, is the definition of fate as Amor Fati is probably described, and what that really means, whether it's fate or is it fate of things that are not necessarily completely controllable, or fate as in destiny that you have no control over. I believe it's the former that I was mentioning. How old were you, Mike, when you had that decision, that kind of commitment, or that statement in your mind that said, I'm going in at least this general direction, much further out into the future, that the ping pongs may not necessarily affect me as much, even though that fate or some things I can't control might throw me back and forth. I'm still going to continue on to that end goal. How old were you?
40, I don't know. It was 11 years ago. I'm 50, so 39, 40.
Okay.
It was when my wife, we separated. It was when I was facing jail time. It was my most severe rock bottom, and it's where I found Jesus. It's the moment where I decided that I was going to choose life over death, and that if I did choose life, then that life needed to look like something, because the life I was coming from looked like I didn't respect it.
It was a dead end.
I didn't respect who I was.
Okay.
And so that's when it happened.
For me, I was probably, I want to say 19, almost 20. I realized the star athlete.
Overachiever. Good on you.
No,
here's
here's
half the time.
here's the thing, though. I kind of,
There's always one.
I was, at that time, I wasn't at rock bottom. I did hit kind of my rock bottom in dealing with the endurance situations when I was, early 40s, almost 40. I had to endure my rock bottom. But at 19, I realized I need to start evaluating the direction that I want to go. I, was a decent athlete in high school. I, was in college, but realized I'm like, holy crap, you're not going to make a living throwing fastballs. You better figure something else out. I had a father who went, through addictions, was dealing with a mother who was needing to deal with those kinds of things. And my parents growing up, still very, very good people. They are a great example of endurance in both their personal as well as their marital relationship. I just realized the life that I had kind of always planned out when I was 19 or, all the way growing up was probably not going to be a sustainable vision for the future. And what the crap am I going to do now? Now, later on, when I went through a divorce, I'd been married 15 years. I'd hit my bottom of, again, realizing, wait a second, you don't have control over other people's choices. Other people's choices are going to cause you pain and throw your expected world into just complete chaos. You still have to sit and endure that and understand that just because you're going through this doesn't mean it's the end of the world, and it doesn't mean that every person is bad who hurts you. And you have to figure out how you're going to continue on enduring, and how can you use this, knowing that you made this choice a long time ago. That goal still can't change. I went through typical early college beer drinking and partying and things like that most of them do. Realized that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go a different direction. that did help me. When I then hit rock bottom, almost 15 years later, I realized, okay, I've got a couple of choices. I can go to the bar. And I was like, no, I've already seen that, both in examples in my life, my father, who was still a great guy, and I've come to respect a lot, other friends, other people, or I can go a different direction. I got, into other activities that replace those things and help me burn through those very difficult times and come out on the positive end. It's definitely not been perfect. I haven't made great choices a lot of the ways, just like everybody does. But my journey was a little different than a lot of other people. So it helps me when I can ask them, tell me what it was like when you went through that. I don't necessarily have to go through that to empathize, but as you're explaining it, it definitely helps me comprehend and empathize and sympathize and go, oh, okay, this is what this person is going through. It's no more, no less painful than mine. Theirs is just different.
Sure.
Jimmy, any last thoughts on, just being mentally tough, accepting that things are going to be hard, welcoming difficulty?
I mean, the mindset for me, I'm hearing two things. First, I have just a general belief that the design of life is that it sucks, right? That someone's either gone through, is going through, or will yet go through a series of experiences that will get them to what we're calling a bottom, right? To reevaluate. And so my definition of success changes and my perspective is changed, right? And so what used to cause me suffering because my perspective changed doesn't cause me suffering anymore. And then as I learn more and understand more about myself, my definition really hasn't changed. It's quite simply success for me means 24 hours of sobriety to live in recovery, and everything else is gravy, and that has worked. Because then whatever's thrown at me, it's all good. It's like we're talking about, we're digging in. But I think perspective and then just that definition of what success is.
Let's talk about definitions of success and more specifically the written goal. So I believe that it is super alpha. It's hard to do, and I would say most people don't do this. But I think if we want to get somewhere, we need to write that down in very specific terms. And I'm curious about your own views of that, your own use of written goals. When have you done it? If you don't, why not? And how's that helped you? I guess I'll start with just my real first introduction to this was I was going into my junior year of high school, and my coaches, I swear they must have gone to some like coaching clinic over the summer. And anyway, they came back all jazzed up and they were all excited, and they had the team write down on a little index card, what is your individual goal and what is your team goal? What would you hope to see the team happen with the team, and what do you want to do? Well, I wrote down that I wanted to be district champion. So that's like, the 6 or 8 high schools in our district, in the neighboring cities or whatever, that I wanted to be champions of that. Well, we did that, and then we went on to further, almost to what were we in the semifinals. So just before the state championship. So we had gone, I think, further than any other team. I don't know the whole history of my school, but then the next year I noticed that we didn't write any goals at the beginning of the season. And I wondered why. It worked so well. It was this kind of dream experience for me, and I connected it to the written goals, and we all did that. The entire team did that. So thoughts about goals and the need to have written specific things out there for you. Do you use that? When have you in the past?
I have. In fact, I've got them since 2017.
Dang.
I had them on my phone. I'm kind of one of a geek, and I actually have.
Yeah, you are.
I have. So this is something that every single morning, and I have for about a year and a half. I type in my weight, and it's an iPhone, but you can kind of create a widget through.
Is that a Google form?
It's a Google form, but if you can't put it, and basically you can't put the form on an iPhone unless you go through Safari. So there's a couple of different ways.
Gotcha.
And like all of my education that I've gained in life, YouTube. That's kind of how I learned how to do that. But 2017 until now, I've put all those down at the beginning of 2021, which I'd set 2020. I wanted to have an lower level 6-figure income with equity in a company. And at the time, I was with a really good company, and I wanted to have some ownership. I wasn't, born or blessed with a lot of inheritance money. And so I knew I was going to have to I had this strategy that I needed to have enough income that I was going to be able to I'd still live modestly and take that residual and invest it in other things so I could earn additional income. And come 2021, I'd started to be recruited by a few other companies, and that eventually, turned into a contract that started September 13th. And I have been since then. I have a difficult time being patient. I had to write things down because I had to remind myself that I'm already getting itchy. I want to take the next step, and it's only been 4 months into a brand new company, and already, things have done really well, but I just have this. I have a very difficult time slowing down, breathing. Just take a break.
I remember when you told me that, man, I got goosebumps. Mike lives in the area here, and he stopped by one probably Saturday and just came in and we chatted for a minute. And he told me that he was talking to this company, and he said, I don't want to just be an employee. I want some ownership. And I thought that was
balls
the cool.
out.
That is serious, man. I was like, you have to be a badass to look at a business owner or a CEO or whoever this board or whoever may be and say, yeah, I don't want just a salary. I want a piece of this thing. That's pretty cool. I was like, whoa.
I guess it's me understanding myself. I'm going to work. So I'm the first one to work, every day, 6:30 in the morning, but work doesn't start till 7:30. I don't do that kind of for me, but there we have employees. We have probably 50 employees, and probably 40% of them have to take a bus, sometimes 3 stops, to get to work. And I have a couple of them that one was homeless, and a couple of them have kind of worked their way back coming from different states, and they're just chilling on the concrete at 35 degrees. And I kind of felt an obligation to say, if they're going to show up that early, I need to at least let them in the break room to warm up a little bit before we go freeze our tail off a little bit more in a warehouse situation. And so I'm going to work hard, and that's how I've always been. And I thought, if I'm going to continue to work that hard, I'm going to take some of this responsibility on myself. I'm not doing it just for free or just for a salary anymore. That's me. And I've had to understand not everyone is going to work that hard, and not everyone they don't need to live up to my expectation of success. Only what we as an employee agree on what they're going to take. I can't transfer my expectations of hard work or success on them. I have to just create a certain thing that I need out of this particular employee, this position. Are you agreeing to do it for this pay? Okay, that's fantastic. And then I've always wanted them to do more on their definition of what more is. Now, some don't want to, and I have to learn to just back off of that and let them do what they want to do.
Wow, man. So you created this years ago in the form of a goal that you've been writing down. You've been reviewing this stuff. You look at it and you tweak it and whatever. That's something that I do literally on December 31st. I've done this probably for maybe 4 or 5 years. Literally December 31st, I stay up late my whole New Year's Eve night. And it's kind of cliche, the idea of New Year's resolutions, but to me it's not. It's more like, what do I want to accomplish in this year? And as I look back at the last several years, I've done a great deal of those things. And I think it's just for me kind of creating it mentally, spiritually. I create it there first and just envision this thing happening. And literally some nights I just go to sleep imagining that that's what's going to happen. And a large portion of those things I've reached. So how about you, Jimmy? Goals, what do you do there?
It's not to the extent that Mike takes it. And mine was born more out of time management because of all the shiny pennies and the squirrels, and my head's always racing. And so it was to quiet things down, it was always to write it on paper, and then prioritize it, and then accomplish it, and just kind of to do that. This year, actually, I wrote some goals down. Same deal, different business ventures that I'm looking at. I know the magic that happens when pen hits the paper, but as far as a systematic, dedicated approach to writing goals in that context, that's not me.
Do you think you missed something from that, or is this? I mean, you're a performer.
Yeah.
You've done really well in your career, and you've just kind of moved through some cool progress over the last several years. But is that something you want to do more of?
It is. I mean, as far as a budget sheet and my business, that's a form of goal writing. Writing things down, tracking. I know how many sessions I did last year, what the average rate was, where I want it to go, what kind of revenue. And so, and then backing that in, and I've got a spreadsheet every week to track the clients that come in and what their rate is. And so in that sense, yeah, that's been something for the last 2 years, that you and I have talked about that I've done as far as that. That's probably the extent. I don't want to.
Is it working? Are you getting there? Are
Yeah.
you on track?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's helpful in that regard.
Taco Mike, how about you, sir? Goals, written goals, having some objective plans and things.
So when I started in my little 12-step journey, one of the things I discovered really early on was the power, and my shrink at the time taught me this, Valerie Dimmick, an amazing person. So the brain is this computer that has all kinds of neurological processing channels. And so there's visual processing and auditory. We can speak, and as we vocalize, we process things, and as we read something and write something. And so one of the things she taught me was to use as many channels of the brain as possible. Imagine a lane, traffic lanes on a highway, and something I realized about the way I processed my life was it seemed like I had clicked into only like 1 or 2 lanes. They maybe like the visual analogy is like there's 12 lanes possible. The brain can like think across 12 lanes. But through laziness, I was living a life where I was only operating in like 1 or 2 lanes, and traffic was bunching up, and there was, road rage and just inefficiencies. And so one of the things she taught me is to use all of the senses and all of the computing channels that I know of, and that I spent some time learning about this. And one of the ways that I realized that I was deficient was this connection between tactile experience and then visual and then auditory. And to break that down simply, I learned that when I thought about a thing and then I wrote it down, it allowed me to process it through channels in my thinking that I was not using. And then the magic came when I could look at it on a piece of paper. And that was this thing that unlocked it for me, is because if I could see it written down, and I've learned that editors will do this. There's a lot of people who do a lot of writing, and to look at it on a screen or to look at it on a piece of paper with a pencil in your hand and to strike through and cross out and write in the margin and do this. I read some study where like editors will almost always, not always, but a lot of editors will, at their own expense, sometimes great expense, print out the thing that they could just read on the screen. But they want and need, their brain is wired in such a way to have that experience of like my hand moving across a piece of paper, my eyes looking at the words, reading out loud what is written. All of that is using the computing power of the brain and all of those channels. So when I decided I was going to be a grown-ass man, I realized that writing things down was a huge power move for me. Mm-hmm. And so then I was in the same headspace where I was like, okay, I need to really direct my thinking energy and my imagination energy into like, okay, I know who I was. I want to just stick a garlic knife or whatever the vampire. How do you kill a vampire? Like whatever. I want to like kill that guy. That asshole's dead. Who's this new guy going to be? Well, we need to design, an architect designs a building, an engineer designs a city, the mechanical engineer like designs a computer engineer designs a phone, like everything that is, someone had to design it. Somebody sat down, put thought energy into it, and created and designed the thing. And so I just thought, well, I just need to create me. I just need to create and design who I want to be. And that involved me sitting down with a yellow piece of paper, the legal pad, and just, what the fuck is this guy going to be? Like, who the hell is this guy? Like, what does he do? How does he respond in such situations? What does he want to do in life? And I just went through this process of like designing who I wanted to become. And part of that was then deciding, well, then I need to reach far. Like, I need to set some audacious, badass goals. I need to imagine, like, what the hell was I put on this earth for? Like, okay, I was given talents. I know what they are. Like, I've experienced them. How the hell can I use them to impact my world, maybe the broader world? Like, what do I want to do? It was so fun to sit with a blank piece of paper and to imagine a life from scratch. And I have since had this conversation with other people who have not had their rock bottom moment like I did. This all came not because look, let me be clear. I am so far from bright. I am no vanguard of original thinking. Almost everything that's good in my life had to be visited upon me through hardship. And then I had to then react to that and then make a good move, but not because I was a good person or because I wanted to be a good person. Again, like, almost everything that's good about me is a reaction to near destruction, and then wake up moment, and then the come to Jesus moment, and then how do I go from here? So I wish I was the kind of person who learned from other people's mistakes. I wish I was the kind of person who could read a thing and it would teach me, and I could, oh, that's amazing. Like, I'll just readapt my life to this because I'm so moved by what I'm reading or learning or being taught. I don't work that way. I have to frunk it up super bad, and then I have to like heal from it and then respond differently. So I'll wrap up with this thought. I believe in my own life that if I do not write it down, then it doesn't exist. It doesn't have form. It doesn't have shape. It doesn't have, I can't tactily experience it. And it's a weird thing. And it's just how I am. But for me to believe that I am moving in a direction of a goal, let's say I make a goal of whatever, X, Y, Z, who cares? Doesn't matter. But for me, it's not real. It doesn't exist. Like, I have my imagination says, oh, I think I should do this. That it doesn't exist for me until it is written down, and not in my phone in a notepad. Although that is part that is useful. But for me, it has to be on and you could come to my house and I will show you dozens. I'm kind of a hot mess, but I have dozens of those legal pads all over. I have a little travel case where I probably have 25 of them in there. And sometimes I will just maybe on an annual basis go through them, and I'll remind myself, oh yeah, I was going to do the thing. Yes. Oh, and I will have to, then recommit. But to me, these things don't exist until they are on a piece of paper and they exist outside of my brain. And then once that happens, I'll be damned. It unlocks some weird, mysterious power. I don't know how to explain it, but I am now living the kind of life that I am happy with. I respect it and I admire it in that I'm doing the things that I have previously set out to do, and am sort of in a way like checking off, like clicking through, like, yeah, I really wanted to be a person that is like this. And I can honestly say, like, in many ways, I am living the life of a person like that. I set out to be that, and I have sort of become that. And I think all of these things, for me, they must be there. If I was to remove some of these components, they would erode away the outcome, and I wouldn't be who I am.
So the way that you're living now, that's written down somewhere. In many of these areas, you've written it down. You kind of brought it into creation because you wrote it down somewhere.
Completely.
I love what you're saying about taking the abstract, just the idea, the floating particles just out in the ether, whatever, like that, to use your five senses to bring it into reality, to write it down. There's a color on the colored paper. There's an ink or a pen or a sound of this pen scratching. There's your hand, the movement, the kinesthetic connection to it. I don't know the science of it, but I know that it's true. You're taking an idea and you're producing it into form. It's not just this floating thing that comes and goes. You can stick this. I've got a sticker. I have this little translucent sticker notepad, and I've got on the inside windshield of my truck right now, I have a little note to myself, and I won't tell you what it says, but it's something that it's not about driving. I've got that all handled. But it's about a way that I want to live. I want to wrap up this topic, but this part of the discussion, but maybe to ask you to share something, maybe a goal that you did write that you reached, if it's nothing too personal. What's something that you wrote down at one point and you got there?
I think for me, it's evolving. I did write one thing down, which was this business aspect, and I achieved that. But I'm continually convinced and reminding myself that this tangible business aspect is less important, and it's more important what Mike mentioned, where he said, who do I want to become? Humans are the only creatures that I'm aware of, that we're aware of, that we have record of. Who knows, we might, find out something else can do that someday, that can literally visualize in the distance from a time perspective what they want to become and get there and achieve it and literally change what they're currently doing. And sometimes, especially men or people who might struggle to go from where they are to a completely different direction by their choices and by these calculated, written down destinations in the future, in their own future, of what they want to become and actually get there. And so mine is going from that particular success to, what do I want to have at the end of my life? I don't think that I'm going to have, I don't think that I want to, or that it needs to be something that is monumental, that could be looked at and say, he raised $1 million to do X for good. I'm still trying to clarify this, and that's kind of what I think of when Mike is talking to the fact that he clarified this. He wrote it down, and Jimmy has his spreadsheet that basically tells him this is what success is to him, because he's in that portion of his life that he has that spreadsheet. For me, I want to be able to say, how will I be able to show other people that through small efforts they really can impact their local, their neighborhood, their person around them, their spouse, their friends, for a long period of time in good, just by some small goals and some small templates that they could implement in their life that didn't require a mass amount of cash, didn't require this grandiose thing, but it was something, it was small in concept, but great in impact. That's what I hope to be able to clarify on a piece of paper, because just like you guys have said, there's something weird that you can't necessarily explain, but you cannot deny writing it down works.
That's awesome. Jimmy, Mike, an actual goal that you wrote down somewhere and you reached it?
So in business, it was that I wanted to reach a certain revenue, and that happened this last year. As far as a toy, I have a 1971 Ford Bronco 302, on the tree. Belonged to my grandfather, and it literally has been wrapped in saran wrap so that the cat won't pee in it for 12 years. And I had a goal I wrote down of I want to unwrap it. I want to bring it back to life. I'm not mechanically inclined, so I knew that would mean certain things. Change the carburetor. It ran. It's running. I got to change some diaphragm, something, because it's leaking gas. But that was a goal that was accomplished. And then in my relationship, my wife and I went on our honeymoon to Maui for our honeymoon. Never traveled really anytime after that. And so I wrote down that I wanted her and I to get into this Joe Dispenza and this meditation that he teaches and go to this week-long retreat. But that meant she'd have to get some buy-in, and we'd have to... Anyway, these things would have to happen, but that was something I wrote down, and we did that. We took 10 days and spent the money and invested the time in each other, and that was a big one.
Wow, awesome. That's great to hear that you did some personal things, and in your marriage you wrote some goals down. That's awesome. Taco Mike, written one that you reached. I guess you talked about in general that you're living the kind of life that you once wrote down, but name something that you can feel good about and share with us.
I wrote down a lot. So I took my life and I just sort of wrote it down in categories, and I decided that and I don't remember how many categories there were, but there were all the obvious ones like health and work and family and marriage and just lots of different things. And two that I feel really good about is one was in my relationship with my wife. Now, a lot of this I wrote down when we were separated. And so I had a vision of us reconciling, and I had this thought that I needed to endure the separation like a grown-ass man. And I had spent years emotionally neglecting my marriage. And then the thought occurred to me that I would be a 5-year journey to repair my marriage. And I needed to decide, am I in it for 5 years? Like, would I be able to endure? She could divorce me. She could do anything. Like, the power was hers, and I was along as a participant in the timeline. And I had to decide, would I be willing to endure for 5 years? And I just made an easy decision. I was like, yes, I'm in this for 5 years. And I wrote that down. A sentence to the effect of, I will endure separation, and I will patiently wait through this journey for 5 years. And it turned out that I got a 50% discount, because in 2.5 years we reconciled. And then another one that meant a lot to me was I had a job. I worked in a business, and I was an employee, and I had duties and responsibilities. And I had a son who was becoming an age where he could join Boy Scouts and start to do more and more things with church. And that would mean the campouts and all of the nights of, going to scout meetings and things like that. And I wrote down that I want to travel my son's teenage life, and I want to participate on every camp out and go to every single scout meeting and do that. Like, I want to be the kind of dad who participates and does everything. And I wrote that down. And he's 15, and I've been to every single father and son's camp out and every single camp out he's gone on, and every scout meeting. There's a few exceptions, but I could probably count them on one, maybe 1.5 hands, where I didn't go to one of those things with him and participate with him and be with him in that journey. And so that's something that I wrote that down, and it is coming to pass. It is true, and it is fulfilled. And there's countless others. And again, just to hit this, while everyone was sharing their experience, it occurred to me that I think I lived my life without writing things down because I didn't have the balls to be the kind of man to follow through with the things that I could imagine myself doing. And so I was a pussy. And I believe that in my life, I didn't write things down because I didn't want to face failure, because my life was generally failure to failure. And if I didn't have any commitments, and if I didn't write things down, then I would not be accountable to myself. And I could be this guy who just skated through, just half-ass. Dude, I half-assed everything. And I think it's just sort of coming clear to me now that by not writing things down, by not making decisions and not committing to anything, it was license for me to be this just half-ass jerkwad of a loser, right? because nobody could pin anything on me. Like, there was no evidence that I was anything other than that. But if I sat down and I imagined and I focused and I used creative energy and intent and I wrote shit down, then that would mean I would have to level up. And I was afraid. I think I was afraid of that. And again, like I said before, I am such a weasel. I try to avoid everything until it is confronted, until it is the police are standing there with my name on an arrest warrant. Like I don't believe I'm a piece of shit until that happens. And that's when I went through this transformation experience like I'm talking about. But once I sort of woke up and became a realist and then started like facing my life and then making these choices that were this conversation is all about, then I decided like, no, I'm going to be the kind of person as a grown ass man, I'm going to write shit down and it's going to exist and there's going to be evidence and documentation and just like a contract, you know, it's also a ceremony, I believe. Like the process of writing it down is a personal ceremony. Like it took me days and days of thought, effort to decide, like, I want to be the kind of man, I want to be the kind of dad who goes on every camp out with my son. Like, I had to decide, like, I had to make a commitment, like, to my son, and then I had to decide, like, I'm going to decide that I'm not going to intentionally let him down. There may be things that'll come along that will bump into that, and, like, I may not be, by the time he goes off to college or whatever, like, there may be some things I didn't do, but it was not because I didn't try, right? It was because I committed. I went through that ceremony. I went through the act of, like, imagining, deciding I want to be that kind of dad. These are the things I'm going to change in my life so that I can fulfill that. Like, it was I went through a ceremony to write those things down, and they exist. There is a piece of paper that I could pull out today, right now, that I could show you that this is who I decided to be. And then you could see that and you could say, well, you need to get your shit together because you're not doing those things. Like, you have slid, right? And so maybe by being the kind of person who didn't do that, it just reinforced that, like, half-assed life that I was living, that I decided, like, that's over. I don't want to be that guy anymore. And then the transformation was, well, then who do I want to be? I want to be the kind of person who holds myself accountable. I want to be the person who makes commitments and then keeps commitments. And then there's evidence that I made those commitments. And the angels and the ancestors can also see that piece of paper and they can hold me to that too. And that's a place that I did not come to willingly, and I did not voluntarily come to that place. It was, I guess, it wasn't forced upon me because I could have just decided to, like, blow my brains out. You were humbled. Yeah, right? So I had options that weren't that, but
one of the things that keeps coming to me, Mike, and Jimmy mentioned it too, when he talked about the squirrels, the shiny pennies, the distractions. Every time you guys are mentioning those kinds of things, it's as if you're creating intentionally your own positive distraction by writing it down, by creating a list. You're basically saying, I'm recognizing that I'm easily distracted, and I recognize that in myself. I'm the one who, if I go to read something, I can barely get through the first chapter because I start asking questions. I wonder why this, I wonder how that. And so there's sometimes when those positive distractions are good and sometimes they're not, but that sounds like one of the great benefits of putting it down. You're now replacing a distraction of what you may even not necessarily intentionally recognize, but you're creating your own chosen distraction.
Oh, that's a cool way to look at it.
I like it. I
love when you talk about ceremony too, man, this is like, I'm placing something on the altar. Like, this is my ritualistic promise. I'm doing this. It's a formality of like commitment and of intention you talk about, Mike. Great stuff, dude. So we're talking about endurance. We've mentioned the mindset that things are going to be hard. We have to pursue the things that we want. And one of the first steps is to decide and write those things down. Keep the things you want to pursue in front of you as written goals. The last part of this segment I want to talk about is adjustments. How and when and why we adjust our plan. Maybe we've run into some obstacle. Maybe we see that this isn't playing out, and so later we're going to talk about sometimes you have to drop the whole charade, but in adjustment, we're going to continue to move forward. We're going to continue to pursue the thing that we're after. We've just got to make a change. We've got to tweak it here or there, maybe a major overhaul, but we're not intending to back away from it at this point. We're just going to recalibrate and figure out a new approach to what we're trying to do. Let's talk about adjustments.
Adjustments. Mike's statements were pretty impactful, I think, this evening, because he mentioned making the intentional decision of then who do I want to become if I don't like what I am. And those can be seen as, both negative as well as positive forms of getting to where you do want to be. If I don't like who I am, what do I want to become? And if who you want to become, what you want to be, is based on sound principles, and you can define proper principles however you deem necessary in your life and whatever's good, the better, the more descriptive, the more solid the principle, these setbacks or these adjustments can be seen as just little zigzags needing to get still to where you want to be. But I liked what Mike said, because I think the more descriptive you can become at who you want to be and what effect you might want to have in your own world. And I'm not here to judge if someone's who they want to be is a leader in business or, whatever it is that they want. I think the more descriptive you can be, the easier it is to overcome or to look at a situation that causes an adjustment or that makes you question. And you can say, how much does this conflict with what my ultimate goal was, with what my ultimate descriptive person that I want to become? Does it interfere with that? Is it just a road bump? Or how important is this little setback? Is it something that truly challenges my definition of who I want to become? And then you can make a quick decision of, yes, I just need to endure this, or I'm going to push it aside, or whoa, wait a second, maybe my ultimate judgment of who I want to become was slightly off, and I need to recalibrate that a little bit. I think it can help you identify a setback from a setback versus questioning your ultimate decision of who you want to become.
Yeah, I like that. I love sitting in this room with you guys. Thank you. So here's what I'm hearing. Do I have a process where I'm aware and mindful? Do I have a process where I can course correct, where I can continue to take a personal inventory so that I can ping against what it is I want to become, what goal I have out there, and evaluate whether it's working or not? Do I have a tribe to bring that information to them? And am I willing to stand naked and listen for their feedback, their honest feedback?
And Jimmy, you're good looking, but please don't get naked here tonight.
And I am. Like, I am not perfect. I have that dis-ease of being a perfectionist, but I also have realized through the years that I'm willing to call a spade a spade. I'm willing to ask for your help. I'm willing for honest feedback because I want to be a better man, because I always want to level up. And it's okay to course correct in my world. But what I always lean into is I do have a process. I'm constantly working on my mindfulness and being aware to course correct, and not, as we've been sitting here, I'm realizing it's nothing the world can do that's going to have me endure. I have to endure me, my natural man, all my imperfections, my character defects, the voices that go on in my head, that negative self-talk. And for me, I've pulled those two entities apart. And Jim is my drug addict, narcissistic, plastic, shallow, fake, phony, fraudulent, false self. And Jimmy is that little boy in me who wants to be loved and to love. That's my essence. I'm not missing any. I'm whole. Jimmy is whole. He's complete. He's passionate. He's loving. He's patient. He's all those things. So the enduring for me is that piece. And so I need to constantly have a process where I'm taking my inventory to see, where is Jim? Is he driving? Because if he is, I'm going to end up in a fight with my wife, and I need to then do the right thing, say I'm sorry, course correct. But it's not the world. It's this battle with my psyche and my ego and my pride and my natural flesh desires. Quite simply for me, Jim's role in Jimmy's life is to hurt anyone Jimmy says he loves. So if Jimmy says, Brad, I love you, Jim's like, okay, watch this. I'm going to hurt that motherfucker. Cold-hearted, like.
Jim, don't why you got to be like that?
Is that the Jim natural self you're referring to?
Yeah.
So you're talking about a like daily, regular,
Yes.
ongoing adjustment. This isn't like after 10 years of chasing this rabbit, you decide, yeah, maybe that's not going to work, and I ought to hunt something else. You're talking about a very regular process of checking in with your tribe. You've talked about that. I love your word about brain trust. You have a process. I'm curious what that is.
There's two things.
About?
There's a daily, and then there's a walk around. And that's been a process. I'm not perfect at it, but I've realized when I saw Jim for what he is, and I realized I need more oxygen for him. He needs to take more of a role in my life, because that's guided by the Spirit, that's guided by love, that's guided by God, and
It gets the best results.
absolutely.
Okay.
And it's effortless. So when that happened, then I had to start putting these markers in my life, these flags or indicators, so that when Jim was circling, they would go off. So in a movie, that would be like the broken glass in a hallway. So if someone's coming down, you could get out the back or alley, torch everything, and escape. I had a service dog. I noticed that when I barked a command that had a little more energy than it needed to, or I yanked on his chain, that was Jim. Jim was out. If I could handle what I needed to handle in that moment, and it took me a while to figure this out, I would avoid an argument with my wife or yelling at my kids. And so I've realized I need to put certain things, people, places, tools that allow me to have that go up, so that when Jim's out,
You recognize
I
it
recognize it further out. Like, I want to see that mother way down the road so that I can handle whatever I need to handle, so that Jim and love wins.
I love that you have this separation. You see this, there's this two wolves in you or whatever, this two, and maybe more than just two, but at least these two almost identities, and you can choose to walk whichever path you want, and one's an enemy of the other. It's beautiful. I love you. You've talked about that in the past, Jim and Jimmy. How about you, Taco Mike? Adjustments. What's the importance of that? How do we do it? When do we know? What kind of processes have you gone through to make adjustments in your journey?
My first thought here is, this is $1 million conversation. This is the kind of conversation where you would pay a consultant to listen to these two guys, or you three guys, and then give you this sort of like wisdom and experience. So your question is, how do I personally make course corrections? The one thing I want to say before I maybe mention that is, I like somebody brought up like the squirrels and the shiny pennies on the sidewalk. I'm so distractible. I'm so hyper interested in avoiding. I want the next piece of dopamine that comes from the cotton candy rather than the true calories from something that, like the broccoli. I want cotton candy. I don't want broccoli. And I always want to take the path of least resistance. And I want to be distracted, and I want endless distractions. This is not answering your question, but this is just maybe a thought about writing things down. When I have a written goal and intention of who I want to be as a person and where I want to go in my life, then I can very analytically, objectively look at a thing that's creeping in that wants my attention. It wants me to say yes to it. And then it allows me this really easy decision-making. My decision-making tree is so clean because I can just apply it to my goals. I could just hold it in my hand. I could just pluck it and hold it in my hand and say, I could just interrogate it. Do you help me move towards my clearly previously stated and defined goals and objectives? If you are that sort of thing, then I think I'm willing to, give you 1, 2, 3 strikes to see if that's going to be the case or not. And so sometimes the answer is like, absolutely no. Then I just can move away from that unemotionally. So it allows me this decision-making process that's super detached and unemotional. Jimmy, I think it said this, like, when I live in emotion, I'm often failing and flailing and a child. I'm a toddler. I'm throwing temper tantrums, and it's a shit show. So for me to have these written, defined goals, it just allows me to smooth flow through the waters of my life. I just I've already set the compass. Does that make sense? Like, I've already locked in my GPS. I'm going here. And then, like, detours, and life is going to have all these detours, but my GPS can continually recalibrate itself. Like, I got to take a turn here to go around this and whatever. That's fine. Like, that's all just ants at a picnic. It's just sort of noise and distraction, but it's not going to ruin my Like, I'm not going to let a few ants on the sandwich ruin my picnic. I'm going to flick them off. I'm going to freaking eat the sandwich. Like, I'm not going to become over emotionally reactive because there's ants at the picnic. That's just life, and I just deal with life. And so that's maybe a little more insight into my thinking behind, like, this is why it's so helpful and important for me to write things down. Then I do not get distracted, and I don't end up saying yes to things that steal away and rob me from my objective and my goals. Now, your question was about what do I do with course correction? I think, again, some of this still matters, so that there are times where I do turn voluntarily on a weird alley street and I get distracted, and I might go down that wrong path or that annoying path or that nonsense path for a while. And then I think I've just decided that it's okay if I'm a loser. Like, it's okay. I've decided that it's okay if people see me as a loser. I'm fine with ridicule. I'm fine with people seeing me for who I am, and that's often a hot mess and a loser and a failure. Like, I'm okay. So I have made a decision, and I think I wrote this down. I might have to prove this to be the case or not, but I think I wrote down, I'm okay. Words to the effect of, like, it's okay if people see me fail. I'm okay with being thought of as not perfect and far from perfect. Like, I am emotionally okay with being seen failing, and then I am unaffected by. I choose to be unaffected by the negative thought cycle, the downward thought process that can happen from that. And so I hope to be the kind of person that when I am going the wrong way, or someone tells me I'm going the wrong way, or the evidence is there and I just realize it, that I can just turn the steering wheel and go back in a different direction. And even when people are laughing at me, and like, I'm okay with that. And I can use that. In fact, I'm so okay with that. Like, I'm okay with taking that and using it as energy of, like, well, that's just power. They're just giving me power. They're laughing at me because they see themselves in me. And I'm comfortable with that. They're nervous. They're laughing out of their fears. They're mocking from their fears. And I see that. And I used to be that kind of asshole. And that's, like, I'm okay with you thinking I'm a jerk. You think I'm an idiot. You think I'm a failure. I'm going to take that and I'm going to absorb. You're trying to throw all that at me. I'll just suck it in like sunlight. Like, it's just fuel. I'll just take it. And then I'll use it to, next level up. Like, I'm just shifting from third to fourth here, and you just put a little bit of fuel in the tank for me. So I've just decided these, and again, these are like decisions. I just decided that I would be the kind of person who will not shy away from defeat. I won't be afraid of failure. I won't be afraid of course correction. I'll just do it. It's just this, it's just a thing. It's just a thing.
I love that. You're saying it's just like the goal or the original goal. It's a decision. You were going to say something, Jimmy?
No, well, I just want to know who's laughing at you. Like, they obviously don't know
They don't
kind of
see
man
what,
that,
they don't see what's really going on.
And if that's happening in your real life, like,
It's metaphorical. It's
Okay,
not. I mean,
all right.
there's not people who are like. I don't think there are.
Well, not people that know you really well. There might be people who see you on a podcast, see you on your channel, see you on
dude,
a
you
page,
are a
make statement.
badass dude.
But that if they don't know you really well, that they might laugh at, and you understand. Jimmy mentioned it earlier, and it's a real key point. You're self-aware that, okay, yes, that's a human thing. I've been a human. I've laughed at others too. That's going to happen, but it's not going to deter me from my ultimate goal.
Yes. So really quick. Here's my thought. You know how the concept
I
is
love your
like
squirrel moments.
Shiny penny.
So the press don't believe the good that is said about
Exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Don't believe the negative that's said about
That's
you.
right.
And so that's maybe my mindset.
Yep.
Is I believe in me, and the rest is it.
I believe in Mike.
You recognize the danger of drinking other people's Kool-Aid,
For good or bad.
and you recognize the danger of the self-doubt and the self-loathing, and you try to steer away from either one of those because they're both cliffs.
They're both
Mm-hmm.
toxic. It's both toxic. Praise is toxic, and so is ridicule.
Yep.
I don't believe either of them.
Yeah, I still remember that one comment where a church leader was getting just totally praised. One person after another would step to the pulpit and praise this particular leader, same one. And he got up and he said, I learned from a very wise leader one time that perfume is meant to be smelled, not swallowed.
Mm.
And so on the praise end, as well as it kind of works in reverse too. Don't worry too much about those that you might perceive as laughing at you.
Great stuff, you guys. I'm really impressed with our conversation here so far. We're going to break into the next part of this, which has to do with patiently pursuing the things that you want, being persevering and continuing to push forward. You've made adjustments. You've had a written goal. You've got the mindset that you can do this thing or that you can accept difficulty. When the going gets tough, when it's just the boring monotony of the journey is happening, when you don't seem to be getting the results you need, this is just the grind and the continuous effort, the long part of the journey right in the middle.
Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.